You'll stay with me.
Until the end.
The story of Harry Potter is one that has been a part of my life for over 12 years. I'm only 18 years old, so I guess that you could say that my journey with the Wizarding World is almost as old as I am. You know, this franchise is one that I hold very dear to my heart, and so this video that I've crafted is one that I want to treat with delicacy and the dignity that it deserves. And to do that, we should go all the way back to where it all started. Growing up in the 2000s, whenever anyone wanted to watch a specific movie or TV series, you would have to visit your local DVD store. And so that's what we did. Every Friday after school, one of my parents would take me down to one of these DVD stores, and I would spend ages trying to pick out movies. Movies that I'd be watching on repeat the entire weekend. And one day, in 2009, I selected a movie called Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. The cashier told me that it was a story about, wizards doing magic, and just like that, I was hooked. But funny enough, when I sat down to watch this movie later that day, I was utterly terrified. I got about 20 minutes into the movie, saw this, and immediately shut it off because I was scared to death and I did not touch it for the rest of that weekend. Months went by. Now, I don't know about you, but I never liked the idea of not being able to do something because I'm standing in my own way. So on one warm Friday afternoon, I plucked up the courage, went into that DVD store and rented Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, and it has had an everlasting impact on my life. There are 7 Harry Potter books, which were then faithfully adapted into 8 films. I'm not going to go into copious amounts of detail of each book and film because then we'll be here all day. But plot-wise, we'll cover it briefly, and even though I have recently read the books, I come from more of a film background, so the movies will have the majority of my focus in this video. In the beginning of this epic saga, we are introduced to our protagonist, Mr. Harry Potter, who is basically... This man is basically living as a slave in the home of his resentful aunt, his damn near abusive uncle, and their nuisance of a son. Harry lives with them because when he was a baby, his parents were killed in a car crash. But as we find out pretty early on, that is not true. We learn from our newly introduced and dear friend Hagrid that Harry Potter is in fact a wizard, and his parents were actually killed by the terrifying, all-powerful Lord Voldemort, who came to their home to murder their infant son, Harry Potter, but was instead destroyed in the process, leaving Harry to become the only person to have ever survived the killing curse, who is now known all over the world as the boy who lived, and has a scar to remember it. That is essentially the starting point of the series. I don't want to go into too much detail because for those who haven't read or seen the series, it's something that you have to experience outside of this mediocre YouTube video. But from here on out, we will be exploring important plot points for the series, and we will be jumping around a lot because there is so much to cover, so you have been warned. Anyways, let's get on with it. In a scenario of chicken versus egg, for me, the movies came first, so let's talk about those. These movies are beautiful. Adapting these books that are just filled to the brim with details into movies that are so vivid and respectful towards their source material is such an amazing feat. I gotta take my hat off to Chris Columbus, because my man had the daunting task of having to set up such an expansive world. His first and second Harry Potter films were the foundation for which the rest of the series is built. J.K. Rowling does a solid job verbally visualizing the Wizarding World, and adapting it for the screen could only be done by a madman. Thankfully, Chris Columbus stepped up to the plate and delivered in spectacular fashion. But that aside, each of the 4 directors responsible for creating these movies did a stellar job, allowing us to have a continuous, flowing narrative across the 8 movies. The first 2 films were done by Chris, and they They're both bright, feel-good movies that, while dealing with slightly mature subject matter, continue to maintain that level of childhood innocence that the characters possess. The third movie, The Prisoner of Azkaban, was directed by Alfonso Cuarón, and this film has a significantly darker tone than its predecessors, and it takes a deeper dive into the psyche of the characters and really grounds them out into three-dimensional people. And out of all 8 movies, this third movie, The Prisoner of Azkaban, is probably the best directed. Some of the shots in that movie are just absolutely outstanding, and I particularly love Alfonso's usage of the long takes because it makes it feel kinetic and anxiety inducing, which is especially helpful in this movie considering there's a murderer on the loose for most of its runtime. Movie 4, which used to be my favorite growing up, is the turning point of the series because it deals with the return of the infamous Lord Voldemort. And this character is a straight up gangster. Like, just listen to this line right here.
Don't you turn your back on me, Harry Potter! I want you to look at me when I kill you! I want to see the light leave your eyes!
Now you cannot tell me that just doesn't give you chills. It's a really fun, adventurous, sad movie that was beautifully made by director Mike Newell. It's a shitty adaptation of The Goblet of Fire, don't get me wrong, a terrible one, but nonetheless it's a solid entry into this franchise. The last 4 movies were done by David Yates, who, like the other directors, absolutely smashed it out of the park. His movies deal with the war that has been brought to the Wizarding World by Lord Voldemort, and they tell some seriously morbid, but again, beautiful, masterful stories. In regards to the acting, I gotta give a round of applause to the mesmerizing performances that these actors delivered. They always say that it's hard to work with kids, and I'm definitely sure that these kids were a nuisance to Carell on set, but they did a fantastic job. Specifically, the main 3, Daniel Radcliffe, Emma Watson, and Rupert Grint, played their roles to perfection. The adult casting was pitch perfect as well. Alan Rickman, rest in peace, good sir, was Severus Snape. Okay, he just was. When you think of Professor McGonagall, you think of Maggie Smith. The late Richard Harris and Michael Gambon both delivered iconic performances in their role as headmaster of Hogwarts, Albus Dumbledore. All the people behind the screen and on screen who were involved in the making of these movies should all be super proud as they completely outdid themselves with this franchise. One of the best parts of this series of movies is that as the characters and actors grow up, so do the stories that they're involved in. The early movies feel really contained and episodic, but as the series progresses, these characters grow and so do the plots they're involved in. In the first Harry Potter movie, for example, these 11-year-old kids are basically trying to root out their teacher that they really don't like because they think that he's going to steal a magic rock. Pretty simple story, right? Whereas in the 8th and final movie, 17-year-old Harry and his friends are trying to find these special objects that they can use to destroy Lord Voldemort in the middle of a full-blown wizarding war mixed in with a fascist political takeover movement. And in between those movies, you have interconnected stories that bridge the gap between innocent, naive child and savior of the wizarding world. Just like we all mature and take on more responsibility in the real world, you can see these characters and actors doing the same exact thing for 2 hours at a time for 8 times in a row. From the very beginning until the very end. From the very first chapter and the very first scene, this story has always been built on the foundation of love. Everything that happens in this story echoes the power of love. Harry Potter, the only person to have survived the killing curse from the greatest dark wizard of all time, survived because his mother gave him the protection of love. It's explained to us that love is a different kind of magic, an older kind, one that will always beat out hate. Love is the reason that Voldemort will always lose. He spent his life distancing himself from human connection and interconnectivity. He has such disdain for collectivization that the man even splits his soul into 8 pieces. Ain't that crazy? And that's why he lost. We're stronger together and weaker when we're separated. People that operate under the guise of togetherness and friendship will always beat out individuals striving for selfish desires. Dumbledore trusts that Harry will be able to complete this mission without him because Harry has something worth fighting for. He's fighting out of love for the people in his life, and he's fighting for all the innocent people who will suffer under the oppression of the dark arts regime. Dumbledore makes a statement towards the end of the last film. He says that
help will always be given at Hogwarts to those who deserve it.
And now that I've gotten older, I've come to fully understand what he means. At least I think I do. Help will always be given to those who aim to act out of service to others and from a place of selflessness. Dumbledore then goes on to say,
Do not pity the dead, Harry. Pity the living. And above all those who live without love.
Say what you want about J.K. Rowling as a person, but you cannot deny that this theme of love that she has masterfully woven into all 7 of her books is just simply beautiful. Everybody loves a good redemption arc. Whether it's Zuko from The Last Airbender or Theon from Game of Thrones, the point is that everybody loves to watch a person that they truly despise genuinely grow and change. We love to watch them live hateful lives as moths, wrestle with who they are in a cocoon, and then emerge as butterflies. One of my earlier experiences with the redemption arc came in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2, the final entry in this epic film franchise. In the first 7 movies, we come to know the infamous character of Severus Snape as the potions teacher at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Towards all the kids, but namely Harry, he is a vile, vindictive, bullyish, and borderline abusive guy. Okay, Snape is a terrible person who harbors a special hatred towards Harry because when he was at school, he had an intense rivalry with Harry's father, James Potter. And as we all know, rivalries are always passed down through the gene pool. But to quickly summarize, Snape and Harry hate each other, okay? Cool. Now in the last film, Snape gets his throat slit by Lord Voldemort, and then is attacked by his snake. It's a long story which we don't have enough time to get into, but as he's lying on the floor bleeding out, Harry arrives and per Snape's request, he takes one of Snape's tears. And after that, moments before he dies, he tells Harry that
You have your mother's eyes.
and then he's gone. The characters and us as an audience are left not really knowing how to feel. We never really liked Snape, but now he's gone. It just feels kind of strange. Later on in the movie, Harry takes the tear/memory that he got from Snape and puts it into the pensieve. For the uninitiated, a pensieve is like a giant basin of liquid/gas where you can revisit a person's memories. So Harry plunges into Snape's memories and he sees a lot, right? He sees not only did Snape have a rivalry with James Potter, but he grew up with Lily Evans, Harry's mother, and he actually fell in love with her. Upon Lily's death, Snape makes a promise to Dumbledore out of love for Lily. He promises to protect her son, Harry, at all costs, and he does. Even though he presents this resentful exterior, everything that he has done throughout this story, he did it for the girl that he fell in love with at school. A girl whom he died looking into the eyes of her son. Eyes that look just like hers. And when Harry and us as the audience sees this, we nearly instantly forgive Snape. Yeah, his methods were a bit out of order, to be honest, and he was kind of an asshole, but he did all that he could to protect the son of the woman whom he loves. He put his life at risk on numerous occasions, and then he actually died to protect Harry. How could he stay mad at a man who helped keep him alive all these years? Harry goes as far as naming one of his sons after Severus Snape to pay his respects and to show homage for the man who died protecting him. Yes, Snape did some terrible things, but as I explained earlier, the theme of Harry Potter is love. It's love that saved Harry that night his parents died. It was out of love that Snape did all that he could to protect Harry, and it was again out of love that Snape gave his life. It's one of my favorite redemption arcs of all time, and it's one that I'm going to remember fondly in the years to come.
After all this time. Always.
Even though I've always considered myself a die-hard fan of the series, this year I sat down and read the Harry Potter books for the first time. I've always had them, I just never got around to reading them. My journey started out with the movies, and they taught me so much of what it means to sacrifice and to suffer, and how our actions should always come from a place of love. Because love transcends everything. And even in the darkest of times, love is the source of light. Harry Potter taught me many things. But watching these movies as a 6, 7, 8-year-old boy, it was the first time I ever saw any piece of media as having a deeper meaning. It was the first time I looked at the world as more than good guys and bad guys. I saw everything as a gray canvas. And it was up to each and every one of us to decide for ourselves whether or not we choose to let the light prevail over the dark. Growing up with this series partly made me who I am today. For I wasn't much younger than the characters and actors in these films, so as they grew up over the course of these 10 years, so did I. Watching these movies for me is like looking at a photo album of my life, with each movie marking a different point in my life and development. For example, as the kids got older and began to stand up for what they believed in, so did I. When Harry and Ron started thinking about girls and dating, so did I. In fact, I learned my first bad words from Harry Potter. Phrases like,
"The bloody hell was that?"
I learned what it means to be brave, even when you are beyond scared. I learned how to be courageous. In the Philosopher's Stone, Neville Longbottom showed me how to stand up to people, even those who are closest to me. Certain mannerisms and traits that I witnessed while watching these movies as a kid, I subconsciously took and adopted them into my own traits and mannerisms. It's kind of weird to think about, but it's exactly what happened, and you won't catch me complaining about it. The Harry Potter franchise raised me. It gave me this crutch that I used to go out into this great big world of ours with a goal to always do my best and to do it with the purest of intentions. There is so much more to be said, but I think that some things are just better left unsaid and should instead just be felt by those who experienced it. Whether you're an adult or a child, this series will take you on a roller coaster of emotions. And the experience will leave you feeling so satisfied when the ride finally comes to its end. The world of Harry Potter may be entirely magical, but the things that it gave to me were very much real.
Professor? Is this all real? Or is it just happening inside my head?
Of course it's happening inside your head, Harry. Why should that mean that it's not real?